All right. Hey, I think I'm live. All right. All right. Let's see. Hey, Cabbage Head. What's up? What's up? Can you hear me? I'm not talking to myself here, am I? I've been told that's a bad habit. Talking to myself here, am I? Whoops. All right. I've got music on. Is that too loud? Too soft? Is it bad to have music? I'm usually listening to music while I'm drawing. All right. Okay, good. I'm glad you answered me, so now I know how long of a delay we have, which is about probably 10, 15 seconds or so, maybe. All right, bear with me. This is the first time I've used these tools, and inevitably something will go wrong. So if it does, I'll figure it out for next time. But anyway, I think it's working, and if it's not, then what are you gonna do? All right, I'm just going to draw for a little bit. Nothing in particular because I'm basically just doing this to set up live streams. But this will be on my YouTube channel afterwards, I think. So I should probably get to it, huh? Yeah, so I am using an iPad now. I did previously use pretty much exclusively Wacom tablets with um, various software packages. Mainly Clip Studio is what I would use, but now I'm almost exclusively drawing on the iPad because I really like the freedom that it gives me in terms of just being able to sketch. It's a really great tool for that. So it doesn't overheat really. It can lounge on a couch or a chair, and I can draw comfortably with it. The battery life is good. So in general, that's pretty much what I choose to work with these days. Um, but of course, regardless of what you're using, it really doesn't matter as long as it works for you. One of the things I really love about the iPad in particular is Procreate, which is an insanely cheap software. I think it's $10 for life. I think they give you lifetime upgrades, which are not insubstantial. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you get with Procreate, and so a lot of the newest art that I've been doing. In fact, most of the line art, I would say at least, and most of the work really that went into Ukulele Cracklestone was done in Procreate. It was initiated in Clip Studio, but it eventually was. I moved everything over to Procreate. So there are a couple of weird things about the software, but for the most part, it's a pretty awesome tool, and it has this great pencil brush. The lack of lag on the brush is really something. So I'm pretty impressed with that. Anyway, I just thought it'd be kind of fun to get in and just do some sketching. So I thought I might show a little bit about how I draw characters. And so I thought I might focus on it's just going to be a sketch, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the Dream Girl character from Dreamside. So this is a character that comes from a project that I'm about to launch in the near future in Kickstarter. I don't have a solid date yet, still setting things up. But Dreamside is going to be a 6-part book series, so it's pretty serious in terms of its content. So it originally was going to be 3 books that were about 150 pages each or so, and it's now going to be 6 books that are about 100 pages each. So it's expanded a little bit. The story is a bit more complicated than it was. But at the same time, by breaking it up into 6 books, I can get them done a bit more frequently because Dreamside's art is extremely time consuming. And I'm working on ways of speeding it up, which is part of what I've been working on since I finished Cracklestone a bunch of other things. But anyway, so I thought I'd just jump in and kind of show you a bit how I actually lay things out. So the first thing that I do whenever I'm drawing a pose, if I'm just doing it for fun, I'm just sort of sketching things out. But if I'm doing it for a comic page or for an illustration or something, I have to think pretty deeply about what's needed at that moment in the story. So I'll just kind of pretend that it's a story moment, and I'm just going to focus actually on a kind of a head close of the character. So generally, when I'm starting, um, I will get a very rough idea of the head positioning. In this case, I'm going to have her look. And let me know if this is unclear at all in the stream. It should be pretty clear. But generally, I'll come in with a rough skull shape and get an idea of where I want the nose to be, where I want the eyes to be. And this is going to change. It always changes. I always have to move things around. But this gives me kind of a very basic idea. And I'm one of those artists who doesn't really possess the ability to visualize finished art in my head. I have to see things as I'm working on them and then kind of see what's wrong and edit as I go. So I'll gradually change things, and that's kind of how I think. Um, it's just the way that I draw. So it's a very reactive style. I don't do an awful lot of um, very clear visualization in my head ahead of time. I just don't really have the ability to do it. I kind of just think about how it should look as I go. Like you can see the way that I move the ear, you know, um, over, just because as I'm constructing the head, I'm realizing, okay, I've got to um, make a change there. Um, Things like popping out the forehead here, I'll realize, okay, this is a younger character in appearance. Um, so should have a little bit of a bigger forehead. If I'm talking too loud or too quietly, let me know. I don't really know where to put the microphone. Um, and there's an upset kitty cat outside my door. So if you hear me meowing, uh, it's not a ghost or a strange person making sounds. It's a cat. All right. The dream girl has who is so named not because that is her name, but it's something that comes up in the story. So I'll kind of leave you to find that out. You'll notice I did something almost reflexively that I do all the time. Under the actions, there is an option to flip the canvas. I used to have this set to a hotkey when I was on the Wacom devices, but unfortunately is not a. I don't think it's a hotkeyable option in Procreate. If you know differently, let me know. But I flip the drawing all the time while I'm working because it helps me ensure that the shapes are where they need to be. When you flip something, well, if you're looking for something if you look at like an image for too long, you get used to its sort of discrepancies. Like, okay, one of the eyes is a little lopsided, and you kind of just get used to it. But when you flip it, it instantly shows you kind of the inverse, because it's mirrored. And when you see it mirrored, it instantly points out all of the awkward placements. Okay, because if they're offset, then they'll look very strange when you flip them. I always love drawing this part of the jaw because you get this satisfying shape here. I have the pen set right now to not widen out much at all as I turn the pen. Um, I have a separate tool that I use for that. So basically, I have like if I hold the pen upright, which you can't see me doing, but if I'm holding it upright, it makes a very sharp point like that, and if I turn it, it does a very wide mark. I don't do that because when I'm trying to draw on, this is one of the unfortunate things about even a tool as accurate as the Apple Pencil. If I tilt it just at kind of the wrong angle, I go a little bit too far, I'll suddenly get too thick of a stroke like that. And so by making a couple of different pencil tools, I can ensure that even if I hold it at a horizontal angle, it's not going to be too wide. So that'll prevent it from blowing up like that. And bear with me here because I'm not very accustomed to drawing while people are watching. I've never really got used to that. One of the reasons that I don't typically live stream is that there's so much awareness that takes up the mind of people watching that it makes it difficult for me to concentrate on the drawing, and I can't really lose myself in it. So, oftentimes when I'm drawing live, I don't draw as well as I would if I wasn't doing this. I'll slip back and forth here between the pencil and the eraser tool, which I can. Procreate lets you use the same tools. So with the eraser tool, I can use the same pencil tool. But here's what's kind of cool: is when I erase, sometimes I want to really quickly cover an area. So when I'm drawing, I'll use the pencil that doesn't widen that I just described. But for the eraser, I'll use the pencil that does. So when I tilt the pen, you can see the shape is widening out. And that allows me to relatively quickly erase sections. And you'll notice that I don't, and this depends on the project, but I don't, for Dreamside anyway, in its current style, I do not create a new layer for line art. Instead, I actually edit the sketch. So it's the same layer that the pencil work is on, is actually the finished layer. And the reason that I do that is I find that if I create another layer that has like an ink line, you can sometimes lose a lot of the life that goes into the initial sketch. And I find that I can retain that far more easily if I just edit the pencil. It's just easier for me to kind of. I'm sort of sculpting. I kind of sculpt draw with Dreamside because I'm sketching and then I'm revising. And this is really how this whole process works. It's just seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, retrying things, and just going until it seems like it's where it needs to go. Like here, I kind of protruded her lips a little bit too much. And if you have any questions, let me know. Happy to answer. I assume that as I do more of these, most of the people that come into the live streams will be artists and people who want to be artists. So there's a lot of useful information that I can provide for people who want to become professional artists. So go ahead and ask questions if you have any. And as soon as I notice them, I'll answer. Okay, so the Dream Girl has this crazy hair. It's designed to look like she's perpetually in a gust of wind. So the hair actually kind of floats behind her, blows backward. It doesn't, sit down like hair would. So regardless of what she's doing, the hair is kind of all over the place. And the hair is a performance tool for her. It conveys emotion. It conveys the state of mind of the character, and things like even the color of the hair changes depending on the character's state of mind. I try and indicate that with her hair, and that's part of the story. One of the things that I've learned over the years as I've worked on this stuff and adapted my drawing style a little bit is learning that I need fewer lines than I think I do, especially when I color the way that I color for Dreamside. So I end up erasing a lot of lines. This actually happened on Ukulele because when I'm just working on the line art, it looks like I need more information than I do, because I don't have the color information there. So I want to make sure that I'm being very clear with myself about the shape of everything. And it does kind of work out pretty well from a sketching perspective, and it helps me see the shapes in 3D which is good. So I can make sure that the character is working with the intended pose. However, once I get the shadow work in and I color and everything, it just the um, the excessive lines can actually take away from the rendered quality of it a little bit and makes it. In the case of Dreamside, it makes it a little too cartoony, and I'm kind of going for a bit more of a rendered watercolor look. All right. All right, give me 1 second here. Yeah, so the lines will end up getting adjusted and changed. Um, some will be added, a lot will be removed. Um, but at this stage, I'm really just trying to figure out where I want everything to be. The Dream Girl's eyes are sort of inhumanly large. Um, and she always looks like she's kind of, um, I guess, overwhelmed and startled would be a good way to describe it. She's designed to look impossibly enthusiastic and very, very, well, open minded. And so I have the open minded, optimistic feeling. I have to convey that because, when you're drawing is performing in a way. You're acting with a pencil. And if you want the character to read properly to your intended state of mind, you got to make sure that you get these subtle little details, which is one of the reasons that I'm always working and reworking things so often. Is because the slight changes really affect the way that we perceive the characters. Um, and that's not even to get into the issue that you can have with the characters just not looking like themselves or changing too much from panel to panel. The Dream Girl has this little bit of a overbite like that, so I drew her jaw a little too far out. And she's pretty much never without a slight smirk. She kind of always has this little bit of a kind of a knowing smile, which is also accompanied by wide but still she's never look uh, like she's uncomfortable with the situation. These are the kinds of subtle character details that go into every drawing to make sure that the character reads properly. If you've ever experienced the effects of the uncanny valley, then you know how um, it's funny how disturbing drawings that are just a little bit off can be. And that's considering that you already know a thing or two about the character. But uncanny valley issues can be a problem even if you're not really familiar with the character, which is why sometimes when a movie comes out and has maybe not such great animation, it doesn't read as realistically as it could, or believably, really. There's an inauthenticity to it. It bothers us, and that's because we're attuned to identify these subtle little tiny differences in expression so that we can see if somebody is alive or not. I mean, just a slight change in the position of the lid of an eye and the character can read very differently. you know in one case they can, just if it's just a little bit too wide, then the character can look crazy. or nervous or afraid or scared, if the eye is closed just a little bit, they'll suddenly look a lot more comfortable. And the same thing happens. Watch this magic. So if I come in here and draw on a little bit of shade and bring that down into the pupil area, then you kind of get this mysterious expression. Realizing I made her neck a little bit too thick in the back. And her hairline should go up a little bit. As I said, this is an exhaustive process of doing and redoing and redoing and redoing. But really, at least for me, I mean, maybe other people have a better way. I guess if I had a little bit more talent, it would take me fewer steps to get where I want to go. But I know where I want it to be. I just can't see it in my head. But it's one of those things, you know it when you get there. Cabbage Head. Real life has an undo button for ink and paper. Yes. Yeah, that would be really handy. I know it. And I get so used to drawing on the iPad and with digital drawing tools in general that I do catch myself sometimes tapping my fingers to undo, which for some reason doesn't work on paper. Is everybody here an artist? Want to be an artist? Tell me what brings you here. Since it's just me for this very first stream, which I guess isn't actually my first live stream. I used to do them a few years ago. The problem with live streams, this is what the reason I don't do them more is I've always wanted to do them more. The reason I don't do them more is I'm always working on something that I don't want spoiled. Like in this case, I'm working on, instead of working on a page spread for the book that I really should be working on, I'm doing this. And the problem with that, of course, is, I don't want to take too much time away from the work I have to get done, but I don't want to be ruining things with the book, if that makes sense. So this is a stage here where I will start thinking about color. In the case of Dreamside, which is, really color is such a huge component to it, even though it's not totally solid and I'm not really set on it just yet. Sometimes the line work changes that have to happen come in after this point. And I don't really notice them until I start adding color. Procreate has this cool option to pull out the color palette like that. There's my layers palette there. And so I'm just going to create a new layer here underneath the line. And now I'm going to switch over to that wider brush because when I'm doing color, I want to cover a large territory quickly. But because I'm working with a rough line art, I'm not going to color this quite the same way as I would, say, for ukulele, which used very solid lines, very solid ink lines. It was rendered, the color on it was rendered. But with Dreamside, it's more of a kind of a colored pencil look, a little bit of a colored pencil and maybe watercolor. So I'm going to use this softer brush because I want it to actually kind of mirror the style of the line. So I'm using the same tool that I use for the line for the color. Although I do use a couple of other special tools here and there. And you'll notice that I'm careful not to go outside the line of the front of the face, but I'm not worried about going over the hair because I'm going to draw over that. With the Dream Girl, she has actually a full rainbow spectrum in her hair. It depends on the scene. As I said before, her hair color changes depending on what's needed for that particular scene. But for right now, I'll kind of go with her full spectrum hair. I joked about her hair with a friend of mine who is a hairstylist to ask her roughly about how much money she would charge to do somebody's hair like this that has all of the complexities of the Dream Girl's hair. And I don't think she was willing to tell me, but a lot of money. Dennis, you sometimes try to wipe the screen after erasing. Yeah, I do that too. I guess if you come from traditional art, if you're a bit more frequently working with traditional tools, then that's what you do. And if you work more frequently with digital tools, then you'll try undoing. I'm going to show you a really cool trick that you can do with Procreate here in just a second. I'm just going to create a rough fill on this. So even though you can see it has a soft edge, right? That's kind of, you can see there's parts where it fades out here. And of course here I've got like a, there's a gradient right there. When I, Procreate has this tool that lets you drag the color and do a fill. Now I'm holding the pencil down. If I drag it to the left, it'll let me adjust. You can see as I go back and forth, it's deciding how aggressively it wants to fill. So I'm going to go as far over as I can before it fills the entire screen. And then you can see it does a really good job. You can see there are a few little areas in here. You can see right here that I kind of have to cover up. And of course, again, because I'm using this colored pencil style, it's really not too bad to have some areas that are a bit rougher. So yeah, once I have this in here, this is a really cool part of working digitally because I can now lock areas. So I'm not going outside of the boundaries of what I've already drawn. In the case of the hair here, because I did a fill, I can do an alpha lock on that. And now as I do the different colors that are needed, I'm actually going to do a straight up gradient first, but I'm going to use a different brush for this. I created a brush that I call Colored Pencil Hatch. It's basically a hatch mark in a square shape that the tool will redraw over and over again, slightly angling and rotating randomly with various settings. So you can kind of see what it looks like here, I think. Right, you can see that, can't you? Anyway, but this is I'll just kind of show you what happens here. So you can see as I zoom in, it has a very quick application of pencil strokes because I was doing all of these pencil strokes and noticing that they were taking a very long time. And take advantage of the tools that you have because you can figure out smarter ways of doing things. It might be tempting to just go and do use a gradient tool or something like that. However, the reason that I use tools like this is because I want to make sure that it maintains its organic appearance. I don't want it to look too digital. And one of the best compliments that I get is when people tell me that they have a hard time believing I did something on the computer. So that's always good. I'm just going to take her to around this blue. The hair would continue up a little bit, and you would get the purples in there. All right, switch back to the pencil, and I'll get her eye. Again, I'm going over the iris because it doesn't matter, because I'm going to just draw over that part. Now I'll show you some neat stuff in a minute. So with the eye, it's important to know your light direction, but I'm going to worry about that in a little bit. And I'll show you why that's so important. But for right now, I'm just going to draw a slight gradient that goes from green to blue. So at the top of the eye, where it's a bit darker, it's a bit bluer. I do this kind of thing all the time, especially for Dreamside. Dreamside uses spectrums, as you can see, as a core story motif. So I'm doing a lot. There's a lot of gradient stuff that goes into it. I'm going to go in and do a little bit of a yellow on the bottom part here. Oops. So I kind of have a full yellow to blue gradient in her eye. And that will get more detailed. Cabbage Head, you like to say you are an artist. Working on a few projects of your own, but nothing crazy. I took your advice about starting small. Yes, that's right. That's good advice. It is good to start small because, well, I always say that that's kind of dangerous advice to give. I did not start small, and that kind of made a project take forever for me. So I think it's generally better advice to start small. But yeah, it really depends on the person, because there are all these different factors that you have to weigh. There's so many reasons why people give up on this stuff. And maybe the reason actually isn't that a project is overwhelming, it's that you took on something that you don't really care about. That's just as bad. That's just as damaging, just in a different way. So what I would say is it's good if you can just find something that's makes you passionate about getting to work. That's really, really important. Okay, I'm going to make another layer because I'm going to start doing some color variances on the face, which include things like the lips. Dreamside uses, like I said, it's a little bit more of a realistic look. So I don't go crazy with the lips, like in terms of doing, like the characters don't look like they're wearing lipstick, really. I mean, this one's probably the most it's eccentric in terms of looking like she's wearing makeup, but it doesn't really go that far. So I just want a subtle variance like this. And I sort of fade, kind of just fade it out. So I don't have like a sharp line. And if I start getting too sharp with it, I'll actually erase out of it, because I really don't want it to look like she's wearing a lot of lipstick. Depending on your skin color, you want to take different approaches to um, the colors that you're using for things like blush and things like that. I just do a slight gradient over the cheek like this, just a little bit of pink that leads into the eye. Whoops, I want to use the flat brush for this. I'm constantly adjusting the size of the brush and the opacity of it. I don't do, for Dreamside, I don't do an awful lot of coloring on the nose, because when you start adding gradients, this is kind of all the rage. People love doing this kind of red nose look. It makes them look like they have a cold, or Ronald McDonald, and it's kind of disturbing. It's not the right look for it. But I'll show you another cool trick here. Is I'm going to make another layer, and actually I'm going to do shadows first, because it's fairly obvious. I'm going to assume that she's in a warm environment, and I'm going to use like a warm shadow color. So we'll go toward orange and right around there. I don't want to get too dark. And then with the shadows, I definitely will use the flat brush for this. And shadows are something that I will rough out and gradually reform. So I get very general shapes with shadows. It's a quick process at first. at first, and then the refinement process usually takes quite a bit longer. But I'm not worried about going over the edge like that. I just don't. It doesn't matter. It'll all get fixed, and fairly easily that'll get fixed too, depending on the piece that I'm working on. So this is where you really have to understand your shapes. You've got to know the shape of a face, what it should look like, what your particular characters' faces are shaped like. You know what they're like. You got to think about their skull. You have to think about the muscles in the face, things that would actually form what you see through the skin. So it's really just, this is one of those things that you just practice with over time, and you'll draw a lot of faces, and you'll eventually get it down. And trust me, as I'm looking at this right now, this looks like a mess. And I know that I have a lot to fix as I'm going, but that's just kind of how this process works. I'm turning the pencil so I get a sharper edge versus a softer edge, depending on what part of the face I'm shading. See right here, I want just a little, like a really hard little bit there, because that's like a little crinkle. Down here, I want a hard edge because that tips into the lip there. But then as it goes out, I'm tilting the pencil so that it softens. That's probably a little tricky to follow, but again, the more you do it, the more you get used to that kind of thing. Ears are a pain. I still don't really know if I have the right shape. I've been drawing ears for so long. They still confuse me. They shouldn't. There's really no excuse. I should just learn how to draw an ear. Looks like I put this in the wrong place. Yeah, there we go. Looks like, Dennis, you're working on your own comic. You finished 5 smaller stories. Nice. Why don't you comment more about them, and we can all check them out. All, what, 4 of us? Ooh, there's 5 watching. All right. You know what? I'm famous now. Now I'm going to turn into a jerk because I'm famous, because 5 people are watching me. All right. I'm just doing, you can see how rough this process is for the shadow. I'm not talking like right into the mic here, am I? I don't know how far to put it away. I have this little fancy mic that's been sitting in my desk waiting for me to do live streams. I felt bad for the mic. So I decided to do a live stream. All right, so you can see I'm roughly following the position of the pencil line, but now you can already see how the pencil line is becoming kind of irrelevant. As I rework the shadow shapes, it gets a bit more specific. You really, I mean, for the most part, I kind of just want the contour line for her hair, not in every way. Sometimes I want lines going through it. It really just depends. But now I'm going to refine it a little bit more. I'll start turning the pencil so that I get sharper bits, so I can, get different shapes. I don't want all the shapes to look the same. I want little bits to kind of cut through, different darkness levels of the shadow. So I'm keeping one finger close to the size adjustment here, so that I can adjust in real time as I'm drawing to get a thicker or thinner brush. Sorry if I sound like I've been lobotomized. It's tricky to draw and talk at the same time. So as I'm doing this, you can see I want to adjust the detail of the pencil line a bit and take out some of this detail. So this is kind of what I was talking about. It's hard to know sometimes if what you need to do is just not draw it to begin with, or if I needed it there to give me the information required to know where to put the shadows. But once I get the shadows in there, I kind of want to get rid of this line. It gives it a really nice, whimsical, rendered look. Hey, hello. Now I have no idea how to pronounce your handle. Is that Dragmundus? It's I'm gonna stumble over people's handles. Whoops. All right. And let me know if the music is bothering anybody. I know sometimes people like to watch these and listen to their own music or whatever, and I don't want to get in the way of that. I just tend to put on music myself while I'm drawing because drawing for me, this sounds probably a little cliche, but it's like a dance. And music helps me keep a certain rhythm. Not literally a rhythm so much where I'm moving the pen in rhythm to what's happening, but there's a sense of music. In case you didn't know if I was a crazy artist, I wanted to make sure you understood. So I just said something very crazy. Yeah. So I do need some description, some line description there. So as I'm taking it out, I'm not just taking it out, I'm also replacing what's there. And her hairline is a little too high here too. So I'm going to indicate a bit more, just a bit further down on the forehead. Because she has a big forehead, but it's not that big. Or rather, I don't want her hair to look like it's receding. More that it's windswept. Because when you're working with cartoon shapes, cartoon characters in general, you know, every mark that you make on them it has a bit more of an expense to it than a kind of a realistic render because you don't have a lot of lines, so the ones that you have there carry a lot of weight. So all it takes is one line. Like for example, if I put say I just put a line like down here under the eye, it makes her look a lot older, just like that. If I put a couple of wrinkles like that, you can see she suddenly looks like she's 30. So communicating the age of the character and just the other general attributes about them, it's tricky. It's tricky to make sure that you do them in a way that communicates the character as intended, but also that you're consistent with that throughout different drawings so that the character doesn't yo-yo all over the place and every page looks like it was drawn by a different artist. I really hate that. Something I'm going to do eventually, not at this stage, but eventually, is color the line. All right, I'm realizing that this up here is just kind of bland. I need a little bit more nuance to the hair. It'll be more interesting if I provide some contrasting, intersecting lines. And another thing that's going to get kind of annoying, this is one of the things that I always worry about with live streams, is that you'll notice that I'm constantly zooming in and out and rotating these drawings. So if it makes you a little nauseated, then I'm sorry. That's something I just have gotten very used to because as I make, I don't like zoom in on areas and then stay focused on them. I move constantly zooming in and out because I want to make sure that what I'm drawing looks good with the piece as a whole. And that I'm not getting too busy and disproportionately busy with close-up areas because I've got to make sure that it jives with the whole piece. Like I said, it's all a dance. Isn't it like a dance? I think it's like a dance. That's not crazy. Maybe it is. What are we thinking so far? This is where you throw a ton of compliments at me so that I feel very encouraged. And then I start drawing even better. Sometimes when I'm not entirely sure how to proceed, this is really useful advice. When I'm looking at something and I'm not entirely sure how to move forward on it, like I'm not really sure what it needs, which is not the case here because it's pretty clear what I have to do here still. Um, but sometimes I can get a little stuck, but I don't want to stop drawing, and so I'll do something that is very simplistic, something that's very easy, that is just like things like this, where I can go in and refine the line because it accomplishes two things. One, it keeps my hand moving, keeps my mind thinking, and it also improves the piece at the same time. And as I improve the piece, I start getting more ideas about what has to happen. See how I'm reducing the presence of the line and kind of letting the shadow and color take over a bit. I don't I don't go nuts with it because I do want to retain the line. This is more of a watercolor look than anything. And I do want it to have kind of a fun, you know, toony look to it. Just I don't want it to be too cartoony, if that makes sense. I feel like you all know what I'm talking about when I say too cartoony. I think enough people speak animator lingo these days. This music has gotten very serious. Another problem with the music is I'm always worried that they're going to copyright strike my video. Um, so we'll see if that happens, but I don't care if that happens with this one. So we'll see. All right, so since I changed the shape of the color, I'm going to show you kind of how I start refining things a little bit here. I turned off the shadow layer because I'm going to pick colors, and I don't want to be picking the shaded color. I have to turn off that alpha lock. All right. And I'm just going to fix the positioning of the color to match the line. But I'm going to do some other things too here. I'm going to start indicating the strands of color that go through the hair. And this is really what makes her hair take such a long time to draw. It's because I'll go through and really detail these and think about how the individual strands would be gradient colored. Because if you get this just right, it really gives the character an otherworldly, almost an impossible hairstyle. And little subtle things like that that could theoretically exist, but probably really wouldn't, help to communicate to the reader that this is a special character who's not the same, kind of human character that Sarah, the protagonist, is. There's something different about her. She comes from a different place. Different rules apply, different rules. So I'll start intermixing the different tones at different positions on the hair. And you can see how it just, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's nothing. Is there anything more attractive than a rainbow? I mean, come on. You see one in the sky and it just stops you dead. So I'll kind of cover the ground that I want with each particular color before I move on. So I'll kind of get all the orange that I want to have. This speeds things up a little bit. And even if I overuse it, then that's not really a problem. But the point is, I want to keep it mostly red, mostly warm colors toward the front end, and then I'm going to kind of get a little cooler as we go back. So as I start using cooler colors like greens and blues and eventually purples, I only want a little hint of green in the front section here, just a little hint. And you'll see I'll actually have it gradate from the yellow So this is how it's done over and over and over and over again. So if you want to know why Dreamside takes a long time, this is why. Oh, well, Dennis, your comment is now on the screen. Alrighty, I guess I can blow up any comment to cover the screen. This music is not the right vibe. All right, that's better. I don't want to go crazy with this on a live stream. But this is really a decorative process. It's not there aren't too many rules beyond the fact that I'll tell myself, okay, in this scene, the character is going to have kind of the full spectrum hair. And so I'll just kind of think about how to make it look aesthetically pleasing for that particular scene. The panel, making sure it fits. Rainbows are tough to work with, though, because they can be overwhelming. They have every color. And so it's easy to have it turn into kind of a gaudy Lisa Frank look. At least 7 people have told me, I think 7 people to date have told me that my art is like classy Lisa Frank. So I'm very happy about the classy part. Lisa Frank is kind of interesting though. She uses I don't think she uses reds. I think the way that she gets the very particular color choices that she has, she uses magenta instead of red. So it goes magenta, orange, yellow, green, so on. So you can check that out. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, if you change one color of the spectrum, it's amazing how distinct you can make it look. But sometimes I have to make her hair kind of pull back a little bit depending on the scene. I might draw it out of view, or I might only have like the red section or something. And it's a constant balance to make sure that she is, fitting the design needs, but she's also not destroying the artistic composition of what I'm working on with her insane hair. All right, as I start to put more of these line details in, I'll start doing things like adding little flourishes of kind of intense color that just pop in here and there. And I'm mostly using the sharp pencil by holding the pencil kind of straight up as I do this, because I want to get these as like smaller areas. I don't want them taking over too much of the space. Having the occasional unique element that really pops stands out. It becomes more memorable. So you got to make sure that not everything stands out, because if everything stands out, nothing stands out. And yes, that's pretty tough to do when you have a character with rainbow hair. The other thing that you have to really watch out for if you're making books is the differences between screen colors and print colors. Because if you're doing an offset print, which means you're using an offset press like we did for ukulele, which is what you would do if you print a large quantity of books at one time, they use a color arrangement that's different. So on the screen, color is made up of light. Red light, green light, and blue light combined together in different amounts to create the appearance of different colors. But since it's actually made of light, you can get these extremely intense colors, like this green. Now that cannot print. because you can't literally print light. Not yet, anyway. So when it's printed, these colors get converted into cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. So since it has to use a different combination of colors, it's not going to look exactly the same. And some of these really intense colors will look kind of mushy when it goes to print. So I know that's something that tends to disappoint a lot of people. Sorry, since I'm here by myself, I have to kind of stop and look at comments. But yeah, I do intend to get some other artists to join periodically, and I'd like to make these more regular. One of my favorite things to do, well, I guess one of the more motivating things for me, when I would, be working on Yucca and on Dreamside, is to put on stuff like this, live streams that I find motivating and inspiring because, I just like to see people creating things. And it helps me get excited about what I'm creating. So I love these kinds of community approaches where people can work alone together. Everyone's kind of working on their own thing, but you sort of come together and inspire each other in the process. Because if you're by yourself for too long and you have to motivate yourself, it can really be it can get exhausting, especially if you're working on the same project for a long time. You might love it a lot, but it's still, it gets kind of tiring after a while to go after it day after day, and not to mention what happens when you run into a lot of problems. Then it starts getting really difficult. All right, so I turned on the shadow layer, and I'm going to do something really quick here. I'm going to temporarily merge these layers together. I'm going to select the merge layers, and I'm going to undo the merging. So I've actually made a selection of all the colors. All right. I'm going to hold this button down, which will allow me to, or rather, wait a minute. I didn't do this right. Just a minute. I'm going to make a selection. I'm going to invert the selection. I'm going to undo the merge. Why is that not doing what I want it to do? All right. I'm going to duplicate this. Duplicate this. I'm trying to make a selection that I can use to cut out the extra shadow stuff that I don't need. So you can see here, I have the color is not selected and anything outside is. So now I can come up here and hit clear and it will just wipe everything else out, which is really handy. Isn't that neat? All right, so now I'm going to flip this again and I'm going to start refining the shadow. Now, strangely, it does keep the history of your colors, but apparently I've wiped it out because I selected so many different colors. So I'm going to have to just estimate the shadow color that I have. But as I come in here now, I'm going to start refining the positioning of the shadows. Did I tell you this is time consuming? I don't know what essential sequential is, but it sounds important. The fun thing about comics and stories, I came from kind of a different industry. I was trained in animation originally, and then I moved to, I actually did a little bit of time with the toy company Fisher Price, and then I went to work at a video game studio called Insomniac Games, where they make Ratchet and Clank. And I was there for a long time, about 7 years, 7 years. And then I moved into doing books. So it's kind of a strange process to get me where I am. But that's because for me, I realized what's important is really just being able to be in control of a creative development. I really don't care so much about the medium. I do miss working with things like music, and Dreamside is actually going to have a soundtrack that my good buddy is making. Um, and that's probably going to be a stretch goal for the campaign to have a printed CD. So the idea would be that you can get sort of an inspired by the book soundtrack. So I miss working with music, and that was one way to kind of tackle it, because music is really the foundation of any story's emotional resonance. If you can listen to um, music that reminds you of something from a movie or something that you really love, that can make you surprisingly emotional. That's the power of music, which is something I miss a little bit with books. All right. Sometimes I'll stop what I'm doing and make some changes where I think they're needed. And since I've done a bunch of coloring work now, I need to select a bunch of layers. I'm gonna do this way. There are different ways of making changes, but in this case, I want to make a quick change to her jaw because it's still protruding a little bit more than I want. So I'm just gonna hit that distort tool here, and I'm just gonna shrink this up a little bit. Switch over to the warp tool. And as I do this, I start messing things up. But it's all part of the process of figuring out how to get things just right. Yeah, that's a lot better. Of course, when you just kind of pick layers like that and move things around, you can really mess um, with the shading that you have. So I have to go in and clean this up. A little bit of the line here. Watch the artists make their commissions. That was something I was thinking about doing at one point. Was doing kind of a live stream where I would draw whatever people want. Thought that might be kind of fun. There is no blur tool on Procreate, but there is a smudge tool. I kind of miss the blur tool from Clip Studio um, because sometimes you want to blur, not smudge. But I'm not complaining. I don't complain about art software in general because I'm just so blown away with what you can do with these things. It's really incredible. I mean, I have the benefit of understanding the juxtaposition between what we have, and what I had growing up, which was a pen and paper. So this is really impressive stuff, and I just see potential with it anyway. All I see are the things you can do. There's very little point in focusing on the things you can't do. Kind of just a waste of everyone's time. Just look at the things that you can do, and then think around that. It's like when if you ever had like a set of Legos, and you have a limited number of pieces that you can work with, and you can either be the type of Lego builder who says, "Well, I don't have enough pieces to do anything really good," um, or you can be the type that just makes do with the pieces that you have and figure out the best thing that you can make with what you have. That tends to pay off a little bit better in the end. Here's some of that shadow refining process I was talking about. Start to pull out things like an eyelid here. And with a very, very low opacity, I turn the brush sideways to get kind of a pillow, soft gradient with the shadow on certain areas, where I want it to be soft. There are very few places on a child or childlike character's face that have hard edges. It's really just, unless you're going for a specific style, that's very, we'll say edgy and cartoony. Generally, you don't want to have too many harsh lines because it makes the character not look like a child. Not that this character is a child, but it's she's designed to appear youthful. And if you do this very, very subtly, you get a degree of control that you could never get with traditional tools unless you work a very certain way. But it's so great that I can just turn the opacity down on these tools like this, and I can use almost the same degree of pressure, but have a significantly lower impact, so I can get those really subtle color changes. Big names from comics, recommended viewing. All right, I will check it out. There's the old eye shadow. You got to have that shadow. It's one of the things that really makes the character come alive. It's kind of amazing how effective that is. A little detail goes a long way. Dreamside is kind of an indulgent exercise in excess, intentionally so. But a little detail does go a long way. If you come up with some interesting sort of hard, soft edge combinations, they'll be very pleasing to look at, and you don't need to have a lot of them. Just have a few here and there, like a few, like the way that I'm doing, just a couple of these kind of sharper hairs in here. It creates a lot of visual interest because it contrasts with the large, blocky shapes of shadow. And because this is in the front of her head too, that's also a place where you look as a viewer. We tend to focus on characters' eyes first and foremost. In fact, it's almost impossible to prevent. Try it sometime. Look through a comic and see if, as you turn the pages, you can stop yourself from snapping yourself from looking at characters' eyes, because that's just what we're kind of programmed to look toward. So it's very, very important to get the eyes right because that's what everybody's going to see first and foremost. And regardless of how much time is spent on the art, people do tend to get through comics and illustrated books, maybe less so, relatively quickly. It's kind of cool because it can lead to a lot of interesting discoveries upon repeat readings if you put a lot of detail into them. I'm sure we've all had that experience where you are reading something that you've read before and you suddenly notice something that you swear wasn't there before. It's probably just that you missed it. Unless you have a magic book. All right, the other thing that I need to do here that I didn't really notice until I got to this point is increase the amount of shadow overall on the bottom and decrease the amount overall on the top. And for that, I'm going to use my hatch brush. And I'm just going to kind of lighten the amount of shadow that's up here. And I'm going to use the same brush underneath and kind of do a gradient because I want there to be, I want it to look round, like a cylinder of hair. All right. I'll show you another magic trick that I use. So a new layer, and I'm going to change the layer style to overlay. And I do this to push the colors a little bit here and there. So one thing that I do with the overlay, actually before I do that, I'm going to get a little bit more of the redness under her eye. Sarah's got this a lot more than the Dream Girl. So kind of get the base effects that I want to do with the overlay. Like there's this technique called color bleeding where you'll have it's something that comes from my days in doing CG art, where you have this kind of radiosity effect where colors will bleed out onto adjacent surfaces. It's a very cool effect when it's done well. So, like for example, the mouth on the outside has more like outside skin tone and the lip color, but if she were to open her mouth, it would be red inside. So you get the red effect a little bit intensified in the middle, like that. And where the lips come together, there's a bit of a bounced color that occurs from the top lip to the bottom lip. It goes back and forth, and that's light bouncing. And it starts to create kind of it's sort of an interesting realistic effect. The hair, for example, here is so red that it kind of bleeds off and colors the skin around it. So I'm just shading a little bit of red into the skin. I'll do a little bit around the nose, but again, I don't want that kind of the clown nose effect. And for the skin itself, it's kind of I'm going to take a little bit of that maybe slightly darker brown color and go into the cracks and crevices here and amplify the brown color too, because like in the same way that the red bleeds as the skin tone hits other areas of skin tone, it kind of it's like an echo as it faces the adjacent side and light hits. It's going to bounce back, and it's going to take some of its own color with it, and that's how you kind of get this color bleed effect. It's a subtle thing, but if it's done well, it makes things look pretty intense. Then I'll do a couple of other little tricks, like on the same overlay layer, I'm going to come in with like a pink color here, and just certain areas of the hair. Just certain areas, not everywhere. And it's going to pop them out, really pop them out. I'll do the same with some of the other colors. See if I get this yellow here, just pop that out there, because that's kind of an interesting thing right there. This is one of those things where you can very quickly end up with colors that cannot be printed. However, if you're doing, say, a digital book as well as a physical book, you can always, fix the colors a little bit before it goes to print. because if you just let it digitally convert the colors to the print CMYK colors, the computer doesn't really know what is important to amplify. I can tell you I spent a lot of time with Yuka trying to make sure that the colors are translating well. Another thing I'm going to show you here is I'm going to alpha lock the line itself. I'm going to show you how I color the line of something. So I actually start with the most common base color of it, right? And the most common color with this would probably be like a dark brown. So I'm going to fill with a dark brown. It's going to go over everything. Okay, so it's going to cover the whole thing. Then I'm going to bring out specific areas. So the eyes themselves, I want to keep mostly, the eyelashes, I want to keep mostly black, because they'll pop out a bit more. And then I'm going to go for a much lighter red, just a little bit toward pink for the extremities. So stuff like the tip of the nose, and the internals, like the line inside the mouth there. See that? And the same for the internal lines around the ears. So there's a lesson for you that'll save you years of figuring stuff out. have your internal lines be lighter than the external contour lines. You'll save a lot of time that way. Do the same thing for the hair. So for the lines that I didn't get rid of, I'll instead color them very bright red here. And then as they get down toward the back, we'll move more toward orange. And I just go through the gradient process here to make sure that the hair outline colors match the color of the hair. And that section. All right, and then the eye. Again, as I said, eyes are so important. So I'm going to carefully color this to bring out that green. And I'm going to get the pupil in the middle and just a little bit toward blue. See how that really makes it, the color pop like that. And I'm going to go on top of this layer, and I'm going to use a sharp pencil, and I'm going to put some highlights in. Highlights help you very quickly add a sense of texture to things. You have to, learn how they work, and you don't have to get it perfectly right. Everyone's always talking about the science of this stuff, but don't worry about it. Just make it look good. If it looks good and people like it, then it works. All right. But generally, the eyes, which are covered in they're wet, right? You want to have kind of a shine for that. Really, the eyes they would be the shiniest part, obviously, of the face. But I do like for her hair to have that appearance that it's kind of shiny too, as though it were maybe just sprayed recently or something. So with this, I'll use the sharp pencil. And I have to think about the shapes that I've drawn here, where they bend, okay? So look for the bends. Another trick that will save you a long time here. Look for the areas where the hair is at an angle, like it creases a little bit. Find those and then make the highlight kind of pop a little bit at those parts. And don't go crazy with this, like I am. Don't do what I do. Don't go crazy with it, because this is, I'm not going to say less is more, but if you have too much highlighting, it will eliminate, it actually has less of an impact. I guess it is less is more, because you want to make sure that there are certain areas of interest. But it's tricky because you want to make sure that you're also being, consistent with your look. So if you put highlights in the front, for example, you should probably keep it going as you get throughout the hair. It just gets to be a little bit less important as we get away from the focal point, which in this case is the face. I'll switch to the brush that can do a wider, flatter shape here. All right. I hope this is making sense. And I hope it's interesting. Because I do this so often for such long hours that I can't tell if this is incredibly boring to people or not. But this is what goes into creating these. I'm going to take a break from the hair here, and I'm just going to show you kind of how I change the texture a little bit for the face. Okay, because the skin also is going to reflect light, but it's going to do it a little bit differently. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the opacity way down. I'm actually going to make another layer, not because it's different in operation from what I was just doing, but because sometimes when I do this, I can screw it up, and I want to make sure that I don't lose what I already did. So when you're doing highlights on the skin, unless you want to go, and kind of make it look like a toony, like it has like an extreme highlight, almost like kind of an anime look where they will sometimes do those somewhat extreme highlights. I'm going to do this in a subtle way where they don't really have, the highlights don't really have harsh edges. Kind of see what I'm doing here. There's a little bit of a harsh edge here because of the shape of the brush, and I'm fading out side to side because it's soft. It's picking out the areas of her skull that would be causing this protrusion. Protrusion. That's a word, I think. And I'll pull back where needed, and up here, where it bends at the top of the head here, is it's starting to kind of bend around. There's a little bit of a bend. I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of a highlight there. Not much of one. That's actually too much. Did I tell you I'm a perfectionist? All right, so, but there's certain areas on the face that receive, it sounds kind of gross, but they get like different amounts of like oil and things like that reflect light differently. So you want to make sure that you're bringing out these certain areas to highlight a little bit more than others. The lips will typically have a little bit of a harsher highlight, but you can see that you can very quickly make it look like she's wearing lip gloss if you create like a hard edge spot like that, and that's not the effect I'm going for. So I want to make sure that I'm being very subtle with a highlight. And if you have trouble, you really just need to kind of work with the different tools that you have. But you see how that kind of avoids it looking like it's gloss, and it looks a little bit more it just looks a little bit more natural. It's still exaggerated a little bit. Subtlety is the key here. I don't like, these really intense nose highlights. You'll sometimes see people insist on drawing. Is this making sense? Not boring. Oh, that's good. That is my. You know what? I think that might be my core objective, to not be boring. So it's good if that's working out that way. Yeah. So areas where, especially also on the skin, where there's like a bend in the skull underneath, like around your nose, like this, where there's kind of a hard edge. You see, it's okay to make a little bit more of a highlight there because you're going to catch that um, that highlight on the bend. Here's a quick lesson for you. This is a very common amateur mistake, and it took me a long time to figure this out. And it's still not totally clear in my mind. But when you see a highlight, it doesn't face the direction that the light's coming from. So basically, the light. Let's just say that the light is coming from this direction. Okay, so it's from the upper left. The temptation, for example, let's just say that I'm going to draw a little mesh here so that you can see kind of like what we would expect is her cheek shape. So you see how it protrudes out like this, right? So she doesn't have much of an under eye wrinkle, right? It's there, but it's there's not much of one. So the temptation would be to make the highlight, be brightest here at the top, and then fade out as it goes down. But we don't actually see highlights quite that way. That just looks like diffuse light. But if we want it to actually look like a highlight, what we actually do, and make a new layer just to illustrate this, is the highlight is actually more at the bend where it's facing us. Because the reason that we see a highlight, the reason that we see it is because of the way the light is bending and hitting our eyes. So you see, this is maybe not the best example of this. But the highlight should not be right under the eye, is the kind of the bottom line. It would be under the eye if there's a little bit of a bounce, like a light coming from underneath, from like under there, and there's just a little bit of a lid, because it makes it look like she's got healthy skin that's not dry. But you can see how this highlight on the cheekbone is not it's not in this section that would be facing the light. It's at the bend where the bone actually is. Okay. Same kind of thing with the nose. Like, for example, the highlight on this edge of the nose here wouldn't really be there. If it's a highlight, we're actually going to see it more in the middle of the nose. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll use different degrees of pressure for the different highlights. Something else I'm going to show you while I've come this far is I'll make another layer and show you bounce light. Bounce light is just this phenomenally cool effect that you should use whenever you can. If light is coming from, as I showed you before, that means that her shoulders or her shirt or something from underneath is going to reflect that light back up. And it's going to hit, like, most particularly here, the underside of her jaw. So I'm actually going to use white, and I'll merge this down. We can merge these highlights together. And what I'll do is I'll just paint very subtly the white. And what I'm doing here is I'm picking white because the background is white. So it's kind of like she's being illuminated from underneath. And Dreamside uses this effect all over the place. So, if she's sitting on a patch of grass, then this light on the underside will be green, for example, because it's reflecting up. This is a really cool technique to get something to look very realistic. And it's also it makes things look magical. So oftentimes when people are talking about, I've gotten compliments about the coloring quality on Dreamside, and it kind of comes down to a lot of what I showed you today. Just a combination of particular methods that generally I think are not done for comics because they're too time consuming, which is one of the things that I'm trying to do a little bit differently. I mean, everyone's had that experience, right, where you pick up a book and it has some great cover art, and then you open the book and you're like, it's not quite as nice on the inside. So I wanted to make sure that every piece in Dreamside looks like a cover illustration. So there are no illustrations in Dreamside that don't have the same, like I would want them, they all need to be good enough to be cover illustrations. Every one, even if it's a small, simpler drawing. Might actually color that a little bit. I can very quickly color it by alpha locking and just hitting the fill layer option there. Dennis, love the shadow from the eyelids and the inside of the nose. Oh yeah, yeah. Those are those kinds of little, yeah. So this is an example of, this is a winner area right here. This is right here is one of those things that without it, you start kind of like the pieces, like if you were to focus on other areas exclusively, they're made better because they're adjacent to that. So there are little techniques that you can do to bring focus and make sure that you spend the time that's needed. So this is a really good rule of thumb for efficiency. And I'm kind of careless about efficiency with this stuff because I want to, I've set certain rules about where my priorities lie. I'm allowing myself to be crazy with the quality, because why not? Because I figure there are only so many ways that somebody can stand out with what they do. And I figure one way that I wouldn't mind standing out is having people wonder how I ever finished a book, because the art style is so complex and lush and detailed, and there are no rushed illustrations. There are none that are junk. So Dreamside has got to be stunning in order for it to really stand out. That's just the rule that I've set. So yeah, find those areas like that they're so great looking that they pull the whole piece up. And you find that happens a lot with illustrations. Sometimes you'll look and you'll say, wow, this piece is really amazing, and you realize it's really just part of it. It's just this one thing that it does really well. All right, I'm going to slightly amplify. This is not really important to do because this is not, a piece for the book. But something that I would do at this point is I would amplify the line where needed. Amplify the contour, because I want to make sure that the line never feels out of balance. And since I'm using a pencil line, I can sketch this in. You'll notice that I actually will kind of sketch in some shadow here. Oh, I want to use the thin pencil for this. So as I go over these areas where there's a meeting of shapes, there'd be a little bit of shadow in there. I'm going to amplify the line there. It just looks great. It brings focus. For stuff like this, I want to put just a few lines here indicating the shape of the hair, but I don't want to get in the way of that rendered look too much that I went out of my way to get. You can see how I really go back and forth because I pulled out the line and now I'm adding more lines. But as I said before, it's because I lack the vision to see this ahead of time. I don't really know where it's going to be, but what I can do is look at what's there right now and react to it and start thinking, how can I make this better? You know, if I had an art show like Bob Ross, I would have had to have been done with this 5 hours ago. All right, so you see with the line, I'm pulling out the style a little bit more and giving it a more graphic appearance, because it is a cartoon at the end of the day. I don't want to go for a realistic rendered look. That's not the intent. So little tricks that I can do to pull things out would be good. Another one here. These are those tiny little subtle details that you really don't notice that well. But like her eyelashes, I might add just a little bit of color to. The kinds of things that if you really look at it, you'll pick out that I did it. But it's more just about creating an overall feeling when you look at it. I don't want you to really notice all the little details. I just want you to be happy when you look at it. And if you're too focused on those unimportant details, then, you know, you're not seeing the forest for the trees. So the trick is to do these kind of subtle improvements in a way that don't draw attention, but they make it better. And you can see they're really, really subtle details, almost ridiculous. Want to see a magic trick? Check this out. So I've got a separate layer that's just a paint over layer, and I'm just going to do an extremely, look at it without this. And now check this out. I'm just going to do a really, really subtle on this new layer. You do a little bit of a glow in the pupils. Look at that. Cool effect, huh? So little things like that can really make the character feel like she's not from this world. Before you know it, you can start getting layer crazy with this stuff. But I do it because I want to make sure that I'm not destroying things. And her eyelashes are a mess. Might even those out a little bit. When I was beginning with Dreamside, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do more of like a cartoony single eyelash shape, or if I wanted it to be a little bit more realistic. And what I kind of came up with is if the character, it actually is both. If the character is close up, I tend to draw a little bit more eyelash detail. And if the character is further away, I'll get a little simpler with the eyelash shape, a little cartoonier. So like you'll kind of just see like one chunky shape. You know what I mean? The Dream Girl is expressive, and she kind of means business in the scenes that she's in. She sort of takes over the scene. Eyebrows have a lot to do with conveying emotion. So kind of amplify the shape of the eyebrows a little bit. All right. Is anybody still here? What do we think, folks? Yeah, so there's obviously, there's more that can be done with these than this. And if this was actually for an illustration, there'd be a whole process of sketching stuff out. But I thought today it might just be kind of fun for you to see how the stuff is actually put together. But yeah, it's one of the more complicated things to do a, we'll say, childish female face, because if you get just one thing out of place, the character can look really, really off. So it's really very challenging to get these right. So I thought that might be kind of interesting to start right off with something that's a bit of a challenge. So I would love to see. Is there anything that you would like to see, or anything that you're curious about that you might be trying to learn? Anything that or you can make any suggestions, and I might sketch something here because this is a lot of fun. And while you're all thinking about that, I'll say that I do plan to do more of these live streams a bit more commonly. I had to get a bit of a crazy setup to make it happen. Um, that involved moving my computer around. So, but I got something that I think I like, and I'm gonna probably do these a bit more often, which also means that I'm probably going to be showing off some of the production work, and that's something that I really am curious about whether or not people are like what people would like in that regard. Like if here's two extremes. One would be you don't know anything about the story, you don't know anything about the characters and where it's going, and then option two would be you know everything, right? Everything is shared, and it becomes kind of almost like a community effort where people come to the live streams, people who are backers in the campaign can sort of participate in its creation and that sort of thing. And I really don't know what people want. I know with Yuka, it was kind of a little bit more toward mystery, and that kind of discouraged me from doing live streams because one of the challenges with comics is if it's an important scene, it might spoil something very quickly. Just by bringing up a page, I can instantly spoil kind of a key story element. So I never know what people want to see in that regard. But at the same time, I would really like to be sharing this stuff with people and getting more community people involved while it's produced. So let me know what you think about that, and if that's something you would like to see in more live streams. Uh, yeah, more about the characters. Yeah, and that would be good. Is maybe do one of these where I can kind of go through and on a case by case basis talk more about the characters. The Dream Girl is a really key character. She's very very important, and I don't want to spoil too much about her in particular because to understand her character is to probably get a little ahead of things. But Sarah herself has got a lot of points of interest. And there are also other characters who are not really explored too much within the first book, like Sarah's dad, Vincent, and Dr. Grady, her oncologist. There's Dr. Chandra, who is a surgeon, various characters from the hospital, and there are also some kind of more whimsical characters that are met in Dreamside as well, which is the fantasy world that Sarah goes to. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, we'll have to figure out a time that makes the most sense. I did run a poll on Twitter to ask people when they would like to see streams and evening hours, which, mind you, I'm on the East Coast of the U.S., so it's the evening here, of course, is not going to be evening everywhere, but people seem to prefer evening in general, and I think that works best for me too. It lets me kind of work out some sort of a task that I'm working on throughout the day, kind of get that where I need it to go, and then it's a little easier for me to think of stuff that I can do for a stream later on in the day. So I would like to do evening, and might make it a bit more of a regular thing. And just to be perfectly honest with you, I mean, I have a big concern going into a Dreamside Kickstarter because Dreamside is an original intellectual property, as we call it, and it's something that's brand new. It's not new really, but it's new to people. And whenever you have a new project like that, it can be the hardest thing in the world to get eyes on it. So it's a big risk. It's a reputation risk to put things on Kickstarter if they don't take off. And so I have to work pretty hard to make sure that people are aware of Dreamside, and every single voice helps, every single person aware of it helps. So people who are here today, I mean, it's extremely valuable for me that you spread the word, to people who might be interested, that you share things online where you can, all that stuff that people always ask you to do, to subscribe and do all that stuff really, really does make a difference. Because if you do if you do live streams and every now and again you can pick up another person who might become a backer for the campaign, it makes these projects feasible. Not just successful, but feasible at all, because without enough support, Dreamside and projects like it really cannot they really can't become a reality because I have to spend my time doing other contract jobs and things like that that take away from what these things could be. So the more support I can generate, the easier it is for me to get them done, and the more I can do, and then the better they can be. And I think that makes everybody happy, especially if we can get more community involvement in production. Would love to do that for future projects, is maybe get more people to, vote on things and maybe creative direction and offer opinions on live streams. You never know what's going to end up in a book. So anyway, yes. So is that cool, ND? Glad to see you're healthy and things are running. Yes, things are running. And like I said, we're moving forward to a Kickstarter soon. I don't have a definite date, but it's probably going to be next month. I think we're probably going to launch day and date the same as Ukulele. So it's probably going to be October 15th through November 15th or thereabouts. I might make this one a little bit longer just to see if we can get a little bit more time in for people since it's unknown. And we'll see what happens. But anyway, I'm going to sign off here today. And so, yeah, make sure that you go and probably the best thing to do is go to dreamprisonpress.com and add your email to the mailing list. To people who are backers in the Yucca campaign, I've got one or two things planned just to kind of make sure that they're kind of the first in line to know about things when Dreamside launches, and possibly some day one deals we might be doing. So make sure you subscribe to the mailing list, and that's probably the best way to stay in touch. Otherwise, we'll see you in the social medias, and we'll see you hopefully on the next stream. So thank you for those of you who came today, and I hope this was a lot of fun for you. It was a lot of fun for me to spend some time, and it's great to kind of kick off these live streams. I'm sure we're gonna be able to do a lot more of these in the future. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you all next time.